Okay, so YouTube has this feature where they would withhold comments if they think that it's too spammy or there's too much profanity in it. And sometimes I'll go into that section and I would manually review the comments. And then I saw this comment when I was manually reviewing them. And if you guys don't know what this comment is in regards to, it's in regards to that story I told in my Tesla video that I made on Monday. And essentially it's about the story where I pitched a Tesla slide deck to the UW Finance Association when they were holding a stock pitch competition. And the UW Finance Association ended up rejecting my Tesla pitch deck. Now, this was when the stock was at like $200 per share or something like that. And, you know, once again, the stock is at $1,500 now, right? So who was right? I'm just saying, right? I'm allowed to brag a little just because I was right. So forgive me for that. But I just gotta say, the words in this comment were a little bit harsher than the words that I would have used personally, but it expresses my sentiment perfectly, and this comment was instantly approved. So thank you, Alka, for standing up for me down in the comments in that video, and thank you to everyone else who stood up for me down in the comments as well. I really do appreciate it, guys. But we're not talking about Tesla in today's video. In today's video, we're talking about Stratasys. So without further ado, let's jump in. So most of you might not have heard of what Stratasys is and what they do. So in case you haven't heard of them, they're a 3D printing company. So they do something called additive manufacturing. So additive manufacturing is when you make products or tools step by step and like layer by layer. So think of a 3D printer, right? You put in a file and you tell it exactly what the structure of the product that you're trying to print is, and then it will just print it layer by layer and like layer the material on top of each other. Now this is in contrast to the traditional way of manufacturing products, which is what's called subtractive manufacturing or injection molding. Sometimes you will hear it. So injection mold is exactly what it sounds like, right? So you have a mold and you inject the material in it and then you peel away the mold. So that's sort of, you're subtracting away from the entire product to get what's on the inside or what's the mold has formed. So that's what's called subtractive manufacturing versus additive, which produces less waste and at the same time is also faster. Now, additive manufacturing is useful in industries like healthcare and aerospace, where you need the component to be really complex, but sometimes it could be really small as well. So that's another advantage of additive manufacturing, where you can make really complex parts and make it really fast, as opposed to injection molding, where the level of precision is just not as high. So that's the advantage of 3D printing. Now, you guys know I'm a big fan of ARK Invest, and this is actually one of ARK Invest's biggest holdings, besides Tesla, of course. So in case you don't know what ARK Invest is, basically they're an investment firm. It's a company that focuses on innovative tech. So groundbreaking stuff that has the potential to change the way we live our lives on some sort of fundamental level. So think of things like Tesla, or think of things like 3D printing, of course, but they also focus on things like gene editing, autonomous tech in general, or robotics is one of them. So yeah, they focus on a variety of different innovative tech, and 3D printing is actually one of their biggest focuses. So Stratasys in particular is one of their biggest holdings. So as you can see from a picture that I'm going to put up of ARK Invest's biggest holdings, you can see that Stratasys makes up a large proportion of their portfolio. So they're putting a lot of faith in Stratasys in particular. And the reason why I'm so confident in ARK Invest is that if you remember back, let's say, I think it was less than a year ago, they put out this price target for Tesla of $3,000 per share. Now at the time, Tesla was trading around $200 to $300, around that range, and everyone thought they were crazy, right? So CNBC invited the CEO, Cathie Wood, onto their show, and like people are like questioning her. And in my opinion, they were actually pretty dismissive of Cathie Wood, and they were pretty rude to her. Just watch the interview and you would get a sense that, oh, here we are having this crazy lady on the set and talking about her crazy price target of $3,000 for this car company that's gonna go bankrupt soon and has no demand and things like that, right? So yeah, they were really trying to spin a big negative on Tesla. We're sitting here in July of 2020 and Tesla is at like $1,500 a share, so it's already halfway to Kathy was the original price target. So I guess, again, who was right? Now, I'm going to steal some talking points about Stratasys from ARK Invest. So please excuse me if I look down on my notes here. So number one, the main attractiveness of 3D printing, as I mentioned earlier, is that it's more precise than traditional manufacturing method. And this is especially helpful for industries like healthcare. This means that you can print a part, like let's say you're making a prosthetic for like a fake limb for someone who's lost a limb. You can do a scan of the patient's limb and basically their stump, and then make that limb fit exactly. Now also you can think of things like aerospace. So if you're making a part for a plane, you really want that part to be extremely precise, right? Because you don't want that thing to malfunction or anything. So those requirements for those parts that go into the aerospace industry, it's really like the bar is really high, right? You got government regulators and you have all the companies' own quality assurance as well. So in order to pass all those regulators and those quality assurance metrics, your part really has to be really good and it has to be really precise. Now I know I keep on using the word precise, but again, that's what it is, right? But looking at the stock price, you can see that recently it hasn't really performed that well. And as a result, I think an argument could be made that the stock is currently undervalued. So you remember that phase when everyone was into 3D printing and people were saying that everyone's going to have a 3D printer in their house, and there were concerns about people printing guns at home and things like that. But that never came to fruition, and it was all hype in my opinion. And as a result, a lot of people have lost faith in the 3D printing industry. But I think that is sort of misplaced, and it's sort of a misunderstanding, because 3D printing was never meant to be sort of a consumer-facing product, right? So it's always meant to be a manufacturing process and like a product for manufacturing. So in my opinion, if you're just a hobbyist or if you're just an individual and you have no like businesses that need 3D printing, it's pretty useless for you to buy a 3D printer and put it in your house, right? It's just cool. So unless you're a hobbyist and you have enough money to toss around. Now 3D printers are obviously really expensive. So yeah, it was never really meant to be a consumer-facing product. So yeah, if you're wondering why the stock has performed so badly, I think that's a major reason. It's just because when the hype died down, people stopped caring about 3D printing. But I think going forward, I can see something like a Stratasys becoming the equivalent of a Skyworks Solutions. So if you guys don't know what Skyworks is, they make chipsets that go into mobile devices. So if you have a smartphone, chances are that there's at least a few Skyworks products in there. And as a result, Skyworks is a pretty richly valued company right now. It's trading at around a 6 price to sales ratio, and the stock is pretty much at 5-year highs because they have all these big companies like Apple and Samsung, all these big smartphone manufacturers behind them. Now, I think if Stratasys plays their cards right, they could become to, let's say, Boeing or Airbus what Skyworks is to Apple, right? So if you could imagine that Boeing and Airbus, they're switching to a 3D printing process and they got to pick one supplier or one or two suppliers that supply a bunch of components, they might pick Stratasys, right, as one of their biggest ones because they're one of the biggest 3D printing companies. So that's a major potential, and I think that if that becomes the case, the valuation will be much, much higher than what it is now, in which case the stock will obviously skyrocket. But for the meantime, I know what you're going to say. Andy, that's not a fair comparison because Skyworks is actually profitable while Stratasys is bleeding cash. Well, that part is true. But I would say that looking at the valuation, the fact that they're not profitable yet, maybe that has already been priced in. So let's look at the valuation metrics a bit of Stratasys. If we look at the valuation metrics, it doesn't look like a tech stock. I mean, you think that judging by this valuation, it was like a Coca-Cola or something, because it's trading certainly like a Coca-Cola. I know the forward PE looks kind of rich, but keep in mind, forward PE is based on expectations. And if you think that the business model is undervalued, you might want to look at trailing metrics instead, which is based on actual historical data. Now, since they're not profitable, there is no trailing PE, which means that we have to look at trailing PS, which is price to sales. And if you look at the price to sales ratio, it's really not that bad. It's barely above 1. So once again, this is not a tech company's PS ratio because this is just way too low for that. So if you compare the PS ratio to anything else like an Apple or Microsoft or God forbid Tesla or something like that, right? So you would see that the price to sales ratio is not priced like a tech company at all. It's priced very low. It's like a value stock at this point. So in my opinion, it's also worth it to look at the price to book ratio. Now, I know we don't talk about price to book ratios a lot on this channel, But price to book is basically a comparison between the stock price and the value of all the assets in the company. So currently, the price to book ratio of Stratasys is below 1, which means that the market thinks that the price of the stock should be lower than the net value of the entire company's assets. So basically what this means is that you can think of the market is valuating this company less than if you were to just break the company into parts and just sell it as parts, or if you just liquidated the entire company and you just redeemed all the assets for its book value, then you would get a larger amount of money than the entire market cap or the entire valuation of this company. So basically a price to book of below 1 just means that analysts are not really putting any high value on this company at all, just because they think that the company will be worth more if they just broke it apart and just sold off everything, right? So usually we see price to book ratios of below 1 in companies that are in financial distress. Now, I would argue that this is not the case in Stratasys, because we'll talk about the balance sheet in a second, and the balance sheet is actually pretty okay in my opinion. But if we look at the balance sheet of Stratasys, it really doesn't appear that they're in any sort of financial distress. They actually have a lot of cash in comparison to debts, and their current ratio is actually pretty good, which in this case, I think a low PB ratio might be an indication that the company is undervalued, as I said earlier. So essentially Wall Street is not giving them any credit, and the consensus is that the business model is just not going to work, essentially. So what do I make of all this? Am I buying Stratasys? Well, actually I'm kind of on the fence about this one. On one hand, it does seem like they're pretty undervalued at the moment, but on the other hand, it does seem that the fact that they're not profitable still makes them a spec play, right? So I can't put a lot of money into this stock just because I don't want to accumulate any more companies that are like losing money on the bottom line. So I already have some Revolve and I already have some CCL calls, and I have a lot of, and even Tesla. I mean, Tesla's moving towards being consistently profitable, but it remains to be seen whether or not they can remain to be profitable, especially given the Roni situation and given all the market uncertainty at the moment. So yeah, I've accumulated a lot of companies recently that are sort of spec plays, including Hyliion, that are not going to be profitable anytime soon. So I really got to limit the amount of spec plays that I have in my portfolio. So that's why I'm kind of on the fence. But at the same time, as I said, it does seem like the company is really undervalued, right? It'll depend on what kind of other deals that are available on the stock market. And if I pick up some shares in Stratasys, I'll be sure to let you guys know. Be sure to hit the like button if you enjoyed the video, and consider subscribing if you like this series. Be sure to follow me on Twitter and Instagram. I'll leave the links down below in the description as always. And with that being said, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye!